Hello and welcome to today's video on the Musician's Toolbox. Today I'll be going over 3 primary ideas for you, the viewer. Firstly, we'll talk about the design process of how this was created. Secondly, I'll talk about the functionality, the nitty-gritty, the blue-collar work of how it really works and functions as an instrument. Third and finally, I'll talk to you about the obstacles that needed to be overcome during the creation of this wonderful beauty. Firstly, the design process was extensive to say the least. There were many ideas that were thrown out, but the final idea I decided to go with, the most elegant idea, while also mixing some hard blue-collar worker's ethic into it, was an instrument designed after a carpenter's toolbox, which explains the size and shape of the design. This is why there are several different rows that are neatly organized of the different elements of this instrument, as well as the final touch of the wooden dowel as a handle on top to increase maneuverability of the instrument, very similar to that of exactly a carpenter's toolbox. Now, the design process was so extensive because of the fact that this was far from the first design that I came up with. There were actually about 6 or 7 others that I scrapped that were entirely different. Not only did they not involve strikers on wind chimes, but they actually involved everything from strings with strikers to toothpicks plucking strings like a harp, and things got a little complicated. So this final design was the most simplistic yet elegant, which is why I stuck with it. Now secondly, let's talk about this idea of functionality that I mentioned earlier. How does this really work? So the way this project works, as you'll be able to see when you will see the wonderful rendition of the song that I played for you all, there's these little pieces of very thick gauge iron or sheet metal that we cut very thin and bent at a 90-degree angle and then spot welded on either side onto cut pieces of just basic iron piping. This is probably the most interesting and fascinating part of this entire project, in that this was the first time I had ever learned to weld. So this was a great experience for me, a great learning experience, and by far one of the most, it left the greatest lasting impression on me. As an engineering student, I see that welding is actually extremely fun. I had never experienced anything like it before, and because of this project, I actually truly hope to be able to weld in the future again. So anyways, on to the functionality again. So this sheet metal that we cut, this thick gauge sheet metal welded onto the iron pipe, is on a piece of all thread, which we screwed in, which is hanging loosely, as you can see, so that it can strike these short pieces of wood dowel that were attached to another piece of all thread screwed on. And that way, on this piece of wooden dowel that is attached to all thread, there is finally a screw in the bottom, which is used as the striker for these wind chimes. Now, as you'll be able to see this a little more in depth, and it will make more sense once you actually see the process. But let's talk about the third and final part of this project, the Edison moments. Now, the major issues I had with this were really in the design. Initially, I spent my first 2 entire days on this project designing and trying for about 15 minutes different designs that looked amazing on paper and failed miserably when I even attempted to put 2 screws in it. So, as you can see, this came out relatively well, actually, especially compared to what I was expecting with after seeing my first 7 designs. It's very different from what I initially planned, but I think the biggest Edison moment for me was definitely having to scrap my entire project that I had spent a solid 6.5 hours on, and have to take apart all the wood so that I could still use it for my final project, which was tough, but I got a lot more out of it because of it, and I really heavily enjoyed this project. So, for all of you out there still watching this video, bearing with me, I thank you. And now, in true elegant fashion, I ask you to sit back, relax, and enjoy this amazing rendition of the classical tune by Beethoven himself. Happy birthday. Cheers, my friends.